Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
After the death of her missing father, the young woman was surprised to be invited to the reading of his will. And the moment she stepped into the notary's office, she saw something that left her speechless. The phone rang sharply in the empty apartment. Victoria flinched, pulling herself away from grading her 8th grader's essays. No one usually called at this time. Her few friends all knew that Tuesday was her grading day, the Spanish language and literature teacher's sacred ritual. "Hello?" A male voice answered, unfamiliar and painfully formal. "Victoria Rives?" "Yes, this is she." Victoria set aside the red pen she just used to correct yet another misspelled G-sure. A thought flashed through her mind, maybe a concerned parent of a failing student? But the voice was too impersonal, too distant. "This is the Ministry of Internal Affairs Information Center. We are informing you that a body has been found and, based on forensic analysis, identified as your father, Adrian Rives, who has been missing for 15 years. Victoria sank into a chair, feeling the numbness spread to her fingertips. 15 years of silence, and now, just like that, on a mundane Tuesday, between grading and her planned grocery run. "Are you sure?" was all she could manage from her parched throat. "Absolutely. The DNA test confirmed the identity. You will need to come in to complete the documentation." Victoria barely listened after that, mechanically jotting down the address and time. Her father. Dad. The man who vanished one spring morning in 1999, saying he had an important meeting. He never came back, not the next day, not the next week, not ever. A successful businessman who had survived the most violent years of gangster capitalism simply disappeared, like sugar dissolving in hot tea. No note, no signs of struggle, nothing. As if he evaporated. After the call, Victoria sat for a long time, staring blankly at the wall lined with modest diplomas from school literature contests. A strange feeling, no sobbing, no hysteria. Just emptiness, and a faint, shameful sense of relief. At least now she knew. No more torturous what-ifs. What if he returns? What if he calls? What if he's found alive in some distant country? That was over. The not knowing was over. She dialed her mother. Dorothea picked up almost instantly, as if she'd been expecting the call. "Mom, did they already call you? About your father?" "Yes," her mother's voice was calm, too calm. "An hour ago." "And? What do you think?" "I don't think anything, Victoria. It's been 15 years. I've thought it all through already." She paused. "The funeral is on Thursday. They said it's just a formality, the remains are in poor condition." Victoria pictured her father, tall, with a rich baritone voice, perpetually messy hair he would smooth down with a wide hand, his ever-present leather briefcase, the scent of fine cologne and cigarette smoke ingrained in his jacket. And now, remains in poor condition. "I'll come over," said Victoria, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'll finish grading these papers and come by." "No need," her mother replied quickly. "I'm fine. We'll talk tomorrow. Better if you come after work. We'll decide what to do together." Victoria glanced at the clock, almost 6. October dust was falling outside, rain dripping down the window pane. It was on a similarly rainy day, years ago, that she first realized her father wasn't coming back. She had stood at the window, staring at the dark street, watching the cars go by, and finally understood he was gone. She had been 25. The doorbell tore her from the memory. A man's unfamiliar voice came through the intercom. "Victoria Rives? Courier service. A package for you. Please sign here." The white envelope looked official, thick paper, formal typeface, 2 sheets inside. The first was a formal notice of Adrian Rives' death. The second was an invitation to the law office of Ernesto Claro and Partners for the reading of his will, scheduled for tomorrow at 5 p.m. Victoria read the second page 3 times, unable to comprehend. A will? Her father had disappeared 15 years ago. No note. And now, suddenly, a will surfaces? She reached for the phone to call her mother again, but pulled her hand back at the last second. This had to be some kind of mistake. Or what? A stream of chaotic thoughts was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Her roommate Martha, with whom she rented a 2-bedroom apartment in an old building near the metro, had come home. "Hey. You look pale," Martha said from the doorway, shaking rain from her umbrella. "They found my father," Victoria said quietly. "Dead." "Oh." Martha froze mid-step. "When is the funeral?" "Thursday." "Should I come?" "I don't know," Victoria rubbed her temples. "There's also something weird about a will. I'll find out more tomorrow." She didn't want to say anything else. It was all too strange. Martha nodded silently. After 3 years of living together, they both understood the rules of personal space well. The evening dragged on. Victoria reached for the number listed in the notary's invitation multiple times, but something always stopped her. A vague unease, a premonition. She flipped through the old family album she had taken when her mother downsized after her father's disappearance. There was her father holding little Victoria near the Christmas tree. A family trip to the seaside in the summer of 1992. Her mother in a sundress, her father in light pants and rolled-up sleeves, young, happy. Then came the business, the money, endless meetings and phone calls, security guards in black SUVs, expensive gifts, and the constant tension in her father's eyes. He never said much about his work. Only once, after a news segment about yet another gangland killing, he muttered, "In our business, you're either a wolf or a jackal. I've always been a wolf. That's why we're still alive." Victoria remembered those words all too well, along with the gold Rolex on his wrist, the heavy signet ring, the checkered briefcase he took with him that final morning. Her phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. "Victoria, a reminder about your appointment tomorrow at 5 p.m., Bolshaya Street, Building 47, Office 12. Law firm Ernesto Claro and Partners. Please be on time. Sincerely, Ernesto." Strange punctuality for announcing the will of a man who had been missing for 15 years. Victoria put down her phone and stared at the wall again. Rain tapped against the window, echoing lost years and unfulfilled hopes. She suddenly remembered how her mother had long refused to file for a declaration of death, even though the law allowed it after 5 years. "My heart tells me he's alive," Dorothea had insisted. But the 7th, 10th, and 12th year passed with no word. And now, official confirmation of death, and a mysterious will. The clock showed past midnight when Victoria finally decided to go to bed. Tomorrow everything will become clear, she thought as she closed her eyes. It has to. Wednesday morning was surprisingly clear, as though the night rain had washed away the previous day's clouds. Victoria woke up exhausted. Sleep brought no rest, only tangled dreams where her father called to her, then disappeared into fog. She forced herself up and went to school. "Victoria, are you all right?" asked the vice principal, Isabel, as Victoria walked into the teacher's room for the attendance book. "You don't look well." "I'm fine, just some family stuff," Victoria replied. "I have an important meeting after school today. Can Angelita cover my last class?" "Of course, I'll arrange it." Classes dragged on painfully slowly. Victoria mechanically explained grammar rules, checked exercises, made corrections. But her thoughts kept returning to the upcoming meeting at the notary's office. What could be in that will? And why wasn't it disclosed earlier, when they were still searching for her father? Why now, just as his body is found? After her 4th class, she called her mother. "Mom, did you get an invitation from the notary about Dad's will?" "What will?" Dorothea's voice sounded genuinely surprised. "No one called me, except the investigator yesterday." "That's strange," Victoria bit her lip. "A courier brought me an invitation yesterday, to the reading of Dad's will. Today at 5 p.m. There was a long pause on the other end. Victoria, her mother finally said, "Be careful, this is very strange. Maybe you shouldn't go?" "No, I want to understand," Victoria replied firmly. "Besides, it's an official notary office. I checked it online. It's been around a long time. Reputable. Then I'll come with you." "No, Mom. The invitation said I should come alone," Victoria lied, not quite knowing why herself. Maybe she wanted to protect her mother from potential distress? Or maybe it was that strange feeling that this was meant for her alone. "All right," Dorothea agreed reluctantly. "But call me immediately when it's over." After her lessons, Victoria went home to change. She pulled a strict black dress from the wardrobe, the one she usually wore to parent-teacher meetings, combed her hair and pinned it into a neat bun. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, pale face, dark circles under her eyes. 40 years old, but she looked 50 today. In the subway, she tried to calm herself by solving a crossword puzzle, but the letters blurred before her eyes. The station, a transfer, a few more minutes on foot, and she stood before an old mansion bearing a plaque, "Notary Office, Ernesto Claro and Partners." Inside, it was quiet and dignified, like a library, parquet floors, heavy curtains, the scent of furniture polish. At reception sat a young woman with a perfect hairstyle. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" she asked with a rehearsed smile. "I'm Victoria Rives. I have an appointment with Ernesto at 5. The receptionist checked the computer. "Yes, I see your name. Please go to the waiting room. Down the hall to the right, third door. Ernesto is finishing up but will be free shortly." Victoria hesitantly walked down the indicated corridor. In front of the door marked waiting room, she paused, took a deep breath, and entered. In the small room with 2 leather sofas, someone was already there, a young woman in an expensive pantsuit, nervously pacing from window to door. She stopped abruptly when she saw Victoria. "Victoria?" she asked without any greeting. "Finally. I'm Beatrice Cabre, your father's business partner." "Business partner?" Victoria repeated in confusion, trying to process what she'd just heard. "What partner? My father disappeared 15 years ago." "I know," the woman nodded, eyeing Victoria appraisingly. "There's a lot we need to discuss, but not here. Not now." At that moment, the door opened and an elderly man in a formal suit entered. "Good afternoon, Victoria. I'm Ernesto, the notary. I'm glad you were able to come." He shook Victoria's hand and turned to Beatrice. "Is everyone ready?" "Yes." "We can begin," she replied, with a strange tension in her voice. "Then please, follow me into my office." The notary stepped aside to let the women in. The office was spacious, with high ceilings, heavy velvet drapes, a massive desk, bookshelves, an antique globe in the corner, and absolutely empty, except. Victoria froze in the doorway, unable to believe her eyes. By the window, back turned, stood a man, silver hair, familiar posture, same height. Impossible. The man slowly turned around, and Victoria felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Standing before her was her father, aged, deeply wrinkled, but unmistakably Adrian. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, and his familiar baritone echoed in her ears. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stood there, mouth open, heart pounding in her throat. Impossible. They had called her. Said he was dead. DNA confirmed. "Victoria, please sit." Her father took a step toward her, and she instinctively recoiled, bumping into the notary behind her. "What? What is going on?" she finally choked out, addressing everyone and no one. "Adrian, perhaps you should explain," the notary offered gently, guiding Victoria to a chair. "I'll fetch some water." Victoria, her father came closer but didn't dare touch her. "I know this is a shock. But I needed to meet you like this, in a controlled environment." "Meet me?" Victoria felt a wave of rage breaking through her numbness. "You disappeared 15 years ago. We thought you were dead." Mom nearly lost her mind. And yesterday the police called me. They said they found your body. No one from the police called you, Victoria, Beatrice said softly, sliding her chair closer. It was our person. We needed to prepare you emotionally. Prepare me? Victoria's eyes welled up with tears. Do you even understand what I went through yesterday? What my mother went through? Dorothea doesn't know. Her father shook his head. Not yet. I wanted to speak to you first. Victoria looked at him, torn between the urge to throw her arms around him and the desire to strike him. 15 years. 15 years of waiting, pain, uncertainty, and all that time, he had been alive. Why, she finally whispered. Her father sat heavily in the chair opposite. Because otherwise, you and your mother would be dead, he said simply. In '99, I had everything, money, power, connections, and that attracted very dangerous people. They gave me an ultimatum, hand over the entire business and all assets, or my family dies. So you just disappeared? Victoria asked, still not believing. No, he ran a hand over his face. I staged my death. For everyone. Including you and your mother. It was the only way to keep you safe. If you knew I was alive, they would have used you to get to me. Who? What people? Old acquaintances from the 90s, Beatrice interjected. People powerful enough to reach anyone, anywhere. And where were you all this time? Tears rolled down Victoria's cheeks. Close by, her father said. In a small town in the region. Under a new name, with a new face. I opened a carpentry shop. Always loved working with my hands. You remember that? She did remember. Her father loved woodworking. At their summer house, he had a whole workshop, made dollhouses for Victoria, bookshelves, carved photo frames. And all this time, you never tried to contact us? To let us know you were alive? Victoria still couldn't believe it. I watched over you, he said quietly. Through trusted people. I knew you graduated, became a teacher. I knew Mom moved to a smaller place. I knew everything. But I couldn't risk even a hint of contact. It would have been deadly for all of us. And now what's changed? Victoria wiped her tears. The man who hunted me is dead, her father explained. Heart attack. 2 weeks ago. His organization collapsed. Now we're safe. That's why I came back. Victoria looked at him, unsure what to feel, relief that he was alive or anger over 15 stolen years. Mom needs to know, she finally said. Right now. I was planning to go to her this evening, he nodded. After our talk. If you're okay with that. Are you? Victoria shook her head in disbelief. You have no idea what's going on in my head right now. Yesterday, I thought I was burying my father. And today. I understand, he said, reaching his hand across the table but not touching her. And I won't ask for forgiveness, because I know this can't be forgiven. I just want to explain. And, if possible, be part of your life again. Victoria looked at his hand, older, wrinkled, with age spots, but so familiar. She remembered those hands lifting her over his head, teaching her to ride a bike, bandaging a scraped knee. So there's no will after all, she asked, changing the subject because she couldn't handle the rush of memories. There is, the notary interjected, opening a folder on the table. But it's a different kind. These are documents transferring to you the assets of the company Adrian has been running in secret all these years, through intermediaries, of course. A company? Victoria repeated, confused. I didn't just sit idle, her father explained. Gradually, very carefully, I rebuilt what I had lost. Created a new business through third parties, a woodworking plant, 3 furniture factories, a construction company. I wanted to come back to you not empty-handed. Victoria shook her head, trying to process everything. Her father was alive, not just alive, but successful and wealthy, yet he had been absent from their lives for 15 years. I need to call Mom, she said, pulling out her phone. And I'll go with you to see her. Right now. This isn't the kind of conversation you put off. Her father nodded, and Victoria saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Was he afraid to see his wife again, or afraid she wouldn't forgive him, just like Victoria? I have a lot to explain to both of you, he said, and something important to show you. What? Victoria asked. Proof that I had no other choice, he replied, and the pain in his voice made her shiver. 15 years ago, I had no choice. None. Victoria sat in the back seat of the black Mercedes, staring out the window at the passing city. Her father sat up front beside the silent driver. Just the thought that he was alive still sent shivers through her. Every now and then, he glanced at her nervously in the rearview mirror, but said nothing. How did you know Mom moved? Victoria finally broke the silence. She's at a new address now. I told you, I kept watch over your lives, Adrian replied, his voice bitter. Not personally, of course. Through trusted people. Although, he hesitated. Once, I did come to the city, 4 years ago. I stood outside your apartment building when you were visiting your mother. I saw both of you. But you didn't come up, she said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. I couldn't, he sighed. There was still danger. I just needed to see with my own eyes that you were okay. They fell silent again. Victoria studied his profile, so painfully familiar and yet somehow foreign. New wrinkles by his eyes, deep lines at the corners of his mouth, completely gray hair. Time had not been kind to him, or maybe it wasn't time, but circumstance. You're not asking who the man was who hunted me, her father suddenly said. I'm not sure I want to know, Victoria replied honestly. Leonardo Canellis, he said anyway. In the 90s, he controlled half the city's auto shops. Later, he moved into the oil business. We clashed in 98. I refused to sell him my assets. He didn't take rejection well. And that's why you had to disappear? Not exactly, her father gripped the steering wheel tighter. First came the threats, then an assassination attempt. I hired more security, got bodyguards. Thought I could handle it. Then they sent me photos, you leaving the university, your mother at the clinic, and a note, choose, business or family. I chose you. Victoria lifted her eyes, meeting his gaze in the mirror. Why didn't you go to the police? He let out a bitter laugh. In 99? Go to whom? Half the top brass were on people like Leonardo's payroll. Those photos were handed to me by my own head of security. You understand? Who could I trust? He was right, and Victoria knew it. She remembered those times well, rampant crime, corruption, lawlessness. A world where power belonged to those with money and connections. And then what? You faked your own death? Yes, with help from 2 old friends, Ernesto, who you met today, and another man who's no longer alive. We made everyone believe I died in a car crash in the suburbs. A burned-out car, an unidentifiable body. That kind of thing happened a lot back then. And after that? I disappeared. New name, new papers, new life. Aged 15 years in one day, he added with a joyless smile. First lived by the sea, then moved to the suburbs. Started with a small woodworking shop, then slowly expanded. Always under a different name, through others. And Beatrice? Who is she? The daughter of the friend who helped me disappear. She's, let's say, my link to the outside world, my eyes and ears in the city these past 10 years. They pulled into a quiet, cozy courtyard. Victoria's mother now lived here, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment she had bought after selling their spacious flat on the main avenue. Has she changed much? Her father asked quietly when the car stopped. Mom? Victoria thought. She's gone gray, of course. Calmer, more reserved, doesn't smile as often. She never believed you died. Always waited for you to come back. Those words seemed to cause her father physical pain. He went pale and closed his eyes for a moment. What's she doing now? She's retired, but still consults at her old clinic a couple of days a week. Can't live without work. Also runs a knitting club at the local community center. She's got a lot of free time now. Those last words sounded like a reproach, though Victoria hadn't meant them that way. She tried not to judge her father, but she couldn't shake the thought of 15 empty years. Let's go, she said firmly, stepping out of the car. No point putting this off. At the apartment door, Victoria paused to take out her keys. Her father nervously adjusted his tie beside her. Maybe we should warn her first, he suggested hesitantly. I'm afraid the shock. I called her from the car while you were talking to the driver, Victoria replied. Told her I was coming with important news. She's ready. That was a lie. She hadn't said a word about her father. Just told her mother she'd stop by after visiting the notary. But somehow, she wanted her father to feel at least a part of the shock she'd experienced. The door opened before Victoria had time to insert the key. On the threshold stood Dorothea, a trim woman with neatly styled gray hair, wearing a simple house dress and holding a kitchen towel. Victoria, I made some pastries, she began, then stopped, seeing the man behind her daughter. Time froze. Victoria could swear she heard her mother's heartbeat. Dorothea stared wide-eyed at the man she hadn't seen in 15 years, frozen like a statue. Hello, Dorothea, her father said quietly. Victoria braced for yelling, tears, hysteria, anything but what happened next. Her mother slowly raised a hand to Adrian's face, gently, barely touching his cheek, and said softly, I knew you were alive. And then, without a pause, she slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed down the stairwell. He didn't even try to dodge or defend himself, he simply accepted it, as if it were deserved. I had that coming, he nodded, rubbing his reddening cheek. And there's more you deserve, she said sharply, stepping aside to let them in. Let's not put on a show for the neighbors. Inside, the apartment smelled of fresh pastries and, strangely, of lilies of the valley, her favorite flowers, the ones he always used to give her on their wedding anniversary. Only now did Victoria notice the small bouquet in a vase in the entryway. It's the 10th today, her mother said, as if reading her thoughts, catching her daughter's glance. Our 28th wedding anniversary, in case someone forgot. I didn't forget, Dorothea, he replied quietly. Let's go to the kitchen, her mother continued in an everyday tone, as though she were welcoming any regular guest and not a husband returned from the dead. I just made cabbage pastries, your favorite, Adrian. They sat around the small round kitchen table, almost like before, in their old apartment. But the table was different, the apartment was different, and they were different too. Her mother poured coffee as though nothing had happened, but Victoria could see her hands trembling. Talk, Dorothea said shortly, setting a cup in front of her husband. Tell us everything. Why you disappeared. Where you've been. Why you stayed silent for 15 years. And he told them. Everything he had said to Victoria in the car, but with more detail, how they threatened him, how his family was being watched, how they sent an envelope with photos taken with a hidden camera, of Victoria and Dorothea, and a bullet, as a sample of what awaited his loved ones. I could have given up the money, the business, everything, he said, staring into his cup. But it wouldn't have been enough. Leonardo wanted to humiliate me, to break me. He wouldn't have stopped until he destroyed everything I cared about. So you decided to vanish, her mother said, not as a question, but a conclusion. Without saying a word to me or your daughter. I couldn't risk it, he looked up at her. You know you're a terrible actress, Dorothea. If you knew I was alive, it would have shown. And Leonardo's men were watching you both for almost a year after I disappeared. A year, Adrian. And then another 14. Was that part of protecting us too? Her mother finally let the bitterness surface. At first, yes, he nodded. And then? Then it was too late. Too much time had passed. I was afraid you'd never forgive me. I thought it was better to leave things as they were than to come back and destroy the life you built without me. What life, Adrian? Her mother let out a bitter laugh. For 15 years, I listened for your steps on the stairs, jumped at every doorbell, searched the crowd for your face. I moved to this apartment just because you can see the building entrance from the window. I thought, what if you came back, and I missed it? Victoria stared at her mother in surprise. She had never spoken of this before. She had always seemed strong, composed, even stoically indifferent to her husband's disappearance. I planned to come back many times, her father admitted. I even made it to your door once. But I couldn't ring the bell. What could I have said? Hi, I'm back. Sorry for the 15 years of silence? You could have told the truth, Dorothea replied calmly. We would have understood. The truth, he paused. The truth is that I was a coward. At first, I was afraid for you. Then, I was afraid of how you'd react. And the longer I waited, the harder it became to take that step. And now? What's changed now? Victoria asked. Leonardo is dead, her father shrugged. Heart attack. That was the sign. Time to end the farce. And I found out I was sick. Her mother instantly tensed. The look in her eyes turned professionally sharp. What is it? Nothing serious, he raised a calming hand. Benign tumor. Already removed. I'm fine. But it made me realize I might not have time. I might die without ever seeing you again, without explaining everything. Her mother stood silently, walked to the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of cognac in 3-shot glasses. I think we all need this right now, she said, pouring the dark liquid. To your return, however it may be. They drank in silence. Victoria felt the cognac burn her throat and spread warmth through her chest. Her father was watching her mother with such hunger, as if trying to absorb every detail of her face, memorize every movement. Do you have someone? He asked suddenly, and Victoria heard fear in his voice. No, Dorothea replied shortly. Do you? What? No, Dorothea, he shook his head. I've been married to you all this time, legally. Yes, she nodded, and for 15 years, I was a widow in every way but on paper. I still love you, he said, and Victoria felt like she should leave, give them privacy for this moment. But her mother must have sensed her movement. Stay, Victoria, she said. There won't be any more secrets in this family. They've cost us too much. She turned to her husband. I don't know what I feel for you now, Adrian. 15 years is a long time. You're a stranger to me. A man I was once happy with, but who now feels almost unfamiliar. I understand, he nodded. And I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were. That's impossible. I just want to be near, if you'll let me. We need time, Dorothea said, and Victoria noticed her twisting the wedding ring on her finger, the one she'd never taken off. You, to become part of our lives again. And us, to get used to your return. Of course, he agreed quickly. As much time as you need. What do you plan to do now? Victoria asked. Will you go back to your real name, your old life? Not the old life, her father shook his head. That life is gone. But I want my name back. I've already started the legal process. My old friend Ernesto is helping with the paperwork. It's hard to come back from the dead after so many years, but it can be done. And the business? Victoria remembered the documents she had seen at the notary's office. I plan to officially transfer part of the assets to you and your mother, he said. The rest will remain under my management, but you'll be co-owners. If you want that, of course. Victoria didn't know how to respond. Money, business, none of it seemed important compared to the emotional storm raging inside her. Her father was alive, had been hiding for 15 years, and now he was back. What was she supposed to do with all that? I'm staying at a hotel, her father said, rising. Here's my phone number. He placed a business card on the table with a plain number, no name. Call me when you're ready to talk again. I understand you need time to process all of this. You're leaving? Dorothea asked, and Victoria thought she heard a flicker of disappointment in her voice. I think that's enough shock for one day, he smiled sadly. Besides, I'm sure you have plenty of things to talk about, without me. He was right, and they all knew it. But just as he reached the door, her mother suddenly stepped forward and hugged him tightly, pressing her face against his chest. I'm so angry with you, Adrian, she whispered. So angry, and so happy you're alive. He hugged her back, and Victoria saw tears rolling down his cheeks. For the first time in her life, she saw her father cry. I'll come back, Dorothea, he said, stroking her hair. If you let me, I'll come back for good. When the door closed behind him, Mother slowly sank into a chair in the hallway and covered her face with her hands. Mama, Victoria didn't know what to say. It's all right, Dorothea raised her head, and to Victoria's surprise, she saw her mother smiling through tears. It's just too much for one day. Even for me. Although I always knew he'd come back. You really knew? Victoria asked skeptically. Of course not, her mother shook her head. But I wanted to believe it very much. And as you can see, she glanced upward, as if addressing someone invisible. Sometimes faith works miracles. I can't believe this, Victoria sat in the kitchen, cradling a cup of cold tea. It's like something out of a Brazilian soap opera. Remember how we used to watch the rich also cry? Someone was always disappearing and then returning. Her mother gave a faint smile, absently adjusting her already perfectly arranged hair. At least in the show, there was dramatic music. Here, it's just silence and cabbage pies. They both laughed nervously, for the first time that long, endless day. What are you going to do? Victoria asked, watching her mother closely. Dorothea stood and walked to the window. Outside, the October dusk thickened, and lights were flickering on in the building across the street. For 15 years she had looked out that window, waiting for her husband to return. And now he had, and she didn't know what to do next. I don't know, she answered honestly. I imagined this moment for years, but now I feel frozen. I can't understand what I'm feeling. Anger? Victoria suggested. Of course. And hurt and disappointment, her mother turned to her, but also relief. All these years, deep down, I felt he was alive. I sensed it, even when everyone said I had to accept it, that too much time had passed. And now it's like confirmation that I wasn't crazy. That my faith wasn't in vain. She returned to the table and poured herself a little more cognac. Just a drop. I can't forgive or forget those 15 years, she continued, gazing into the golden liquid. But I also can't just erase from my life the man I've loved for more than 30 years. You still love him? Victoria asked, surprised. Is love a switch? Click, and it's gone, her mother gave a sad smile. No, sweetheart. Love doesn't disappear. Even when you're angry, hurt, even when you hate, it transforms. It becomes something else. Victoria fell silent. She remembered how her mother had remained strong all these years, never cried in front of her, never complained, never spoke ill of her father. And yet, she must have suffered the most. And you? Dorothea asked suddenly. What do you feel? I don't know, Victoria looked away. On one hand, I understand his reasons. He wanted to protect us. But on the other, he could have found another way. Gone to security, moved us all together, anything. Not just vanished. In '99, security services didn't protect businessmen, her mother said quietly. And move where? With no money, no connections, constant threat. He was right, Victoria. That was the only way back then. Maybe, Victoria admitted reluctantly. But afterward? Years passed, and he stayed silent, even when the danger was gone. Her mother shook her head thoughtfully. You know, I've thought about it a lot. Fear is a strange thing. It paralyzes you. At first, Adrian was afraid for us. Then he was afraid of how we'd react. And the longer he waited, the scarier it became to take that step. He trapped himself. So what now? Victoria sighed. He just comes back into our lives like nothing happened? Lives with you, becomes my father again? I don't know. Dorothea finished her cognac and firmly set the glass down. But I do know one thing, we need answers. All of them. And for that, we have to meet with him again. Preferably tomorrow. She picked up the business card her husband had left and dialed the number, turning on the speakerphone. Yes, her father's voice sounded cautious. Adrian, it's Dorothea. Victoria and I want to meet with you tomorrow. Her voice was calm, professional. Do you have a place where we can talk? Somewhere private. We'll need time. Of course, his voice softened with relief. I have a rented office near the hotel. No one will disturb us. I'll send a car. What time? 11, her mother replied without looking at Victoria. Adrian, she paused, prepare the documents, photos, recordings, anything that can confirm your story. I want proof. Every last detail. I have everything you'll need, he answered seriously. I've been waiting for this conversation for 15 years, Dorothea. I'm ready. When the call ended, Victoria looked at her mother in surprise. What if I have class tomorrow? You're in mourning, Dorothea replied simply. Officially, your father is dead. That gives you at least 3 days of legitimate leave. Her voice had that commanding tone Victoria hadn't heard in years, since her mother had run a hospital department. Decisive, composed, not open to argument. And one more thing, her mother added. You're staying here tonight. I don't want you to be alone right now. Victoria didn't protest. She didn't want to go back to an empty apartment either, where she'd have to explain to the neighbor why she'd been crying when her father had just been found dead. The night was restless. Victoria tossed on the fold-out bed in the living room, listening to her mother's soft footsteps through the wall. She wasn't sleeping either, moving things around, shuffling papers. Around 3 in the morning, Victoria got up. Dorothea was sitting at her desk, old photographs spread out before her. Can't sleep? She asked without looking up. Like you, Victoria sat beside her. What are you doing? Looking at who we were. And thinking about who we became, her mother handed her a photograph. Remember this trip? Summer of '95, the sea. Your father had just signed a big contract and took us to that Pearl resort. Victoria remembered. It had been a happy time. They had money, but not the problems that often follow wealth. They were just a family, mom, dad, and her. Sunbathing, taking tours, eating ice cream on the boardwalk. And this one, her mother handed over another photo, our wedding. Look how young we were. I was 22, your father 27. No money. We rented a room in a communal flat. But we were so happy. In the black and white photo, her young parents smiled at the camera, happy, confident about the future, unaware of what lay ahead. Did you love him? Victoria asked quietly. Back then, at the beginning? More than life itself, her mother answered simply. He burst into my life like a hurricane. I was a quiet straight-A student, future doctor. He was an engineering student with a guitar and a motorcycle. My parents were against it. Said he was irresponsible. But I fell in love at first sight. And later, when the business started. Later, Dorothea paused, he changed. Became tougher, more focused. He laughed less. Always on the phone, always working. But I still loved him. Just differently. She gathered the photos into a neat stack and tied them with a ribbon. Go to bed, Victoria, she said gently. Tomorrow will be a hard day. But Victoria didn't move. Mom, and you? Can you forgive him? After everything? Dorothea stared out the window for a long time before answering. I don't know, she said at last. But I want to try. Not for him, for me. Because living with resentment and anger for 15 years is too long. I'm tired, Victoria. Tired of being the abandoned wife, tired of waiting, tired of being angry. Maybe his return is a chance to finally let go of the past. One way or another. In the morning, just as he promised, their father sent a car for them. The same black Mercedes with the silent driver. The ride to the office took about half an hour. They didn't speak, each lost in their own thoughts. The office was in a modern business center not far from the hotel. A sleek reception area, minimalist design, panoramic windows overlooking the river. Their father met them at the entrance. Impeccable suit, neatly combed gray hair, guarded expression. Come in, he gestured toward the conference room. I prepared everything, just as you asked, Dorothea. In the spacious room stood a long table, neatly arranged with folders of documents, old photographs, and some recordings. A large screen was mounted on the wall, connected to a laptop. Did you have breakfast? He asked. We're not hungry, their mother replied, sitting down at the table. Let's begin, Adrian. We have a lot of questions. He nodded and took a seat opposite them. Where should I start? From the very beginning, Dorothea said, looking him straight in the eye, without a hint of a smile. From the moment you disappeared. Their father opened the first folder. April 18, 1999, he began. I received this envelope. He pulled out a yellowed envelope and laid it on the table. Inside were photos of both of you and a threatening note. Victoria carefully took the envelope. Inside were indeed photographs, her leaving the university, her mother outside the hospital. And a typed note, choose, business or family. I went to see an old friend, Ernesto, their father continued. He was already a well-known notary at the time and had certain connections. He confirmed the threats were serious and advised me to contact someone else. He pulled out a photo showing him with another man. This is Enrique Serango, a former colonel. In the 90s, he worked in private security. He was the one who helped me disappear. How? Asked Victoria. He prepared documents under a new identity. Found a suitable body for the staged death. A homeless man who had died from exposure, about my build. He arranged a car accident with my vehicle. Meanwhile, I was taken to the coast, their father explained calmly, as if recounting a movie plot rather than his own life. And then, their mother asked, her hands clasped tightly together. Then I staged a car crash with a burnt-out vehicle. The authorities supposedly found an unidentifiable body inside. In reality, it was the homeless man. After that, I started living as Arturo Morin. I moved to a small town, opened a carpentry workshop. Lived quietly, under the radar. Gradually, I built a new business, through trusted intermediaries, of course. I didn't return to the capital for the first 5 years at all. I communicated with Ernesto and Enrique only through secure channels. He opened his laptop and projected some documents onto the screen. Here are my ID papers under Arturo's name. Here's the permit for my workshop, and photos of my house. He flipped through the slides, showing images of his other life, a modest home with a garden, a workshop filled with wooden crafts. When did Beatrice come into the picture? Asked Victoria, recalling the arrogant woman from the notary office. Beatrice is Enrique's daughter, her father explained. She was studying law when all this happened. Later, when Enrique fell seriously ill in 2005, she became my contact in the capital. She kept an eye on you, passed along information, and later helped with the business. Kept an eye on us, her mother's voice turned sharp. So, all these years, you were spying on us? Not spying, Dorothea, he shook his head. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. That you were managing. Especially in the first year after I disappeared, when Leonardo's people were also watching you. Beatrice and her father set up a surveillance system that didn't draw attention. Only after a year, when we were sure you weren't being followed anymore, could we start receiving regular updates. We were managing, Dorothea snapped. Without you. A heavy silence fell. Their father took a breath and went on. In 2007, I risked coming back to the capital. Briefly, just for a day. Ernesto arranged a meeting with someone from Leonardo's circle. A client he trusted. That man confirmed I was still being watched. Leonardo hadn't believed in my death. Why? Asked Victoria. There was a body, a crash? Because Leonardo was paranoid, their father said with a sad smile. He had staged so many fake deaths himself that he trusted nothing. And rightly so. In that world, you couldn't trust anyone. And the agent who told us your body had been found, their mother asked. Who was she? One of Beatrice's employees, he answered. We needed to set the stage, create an emotional shock, so that the impact of my reappearance wouldn't be quite so extreme. I'm sorry for that. He did look remorseful. We just didn't know how else to do it. How convenient, Victoria said sarcastically. First you announce a death, then rise from the grave. No stress at all, really. I understand your anger, he said, lowering his eyes. And I deserve it. Tell us about Leonardo. Dorothea changed the subject. Are you sure he's really dead? That this isn't another fake out? I'm sure, he nodded. I was at his funeral, seeing their surprised looks, he added, posing as a distant relative. I needed to be certain. I also have reliable sources at the clinic where he died. It was a massive heart attack, no tricks. And his organization, his wife continued the interrogation. Are you sure it's gone? Not gone, transformed, he replied. It's now a fully legal holding company, run by his son. But Canellis Jr. isn't interested in his father's old affairs. He's a man of a new generation, educated in London, different values. He has no stake in the old vendettas of the 90s. Victoria noticed her mother studying her father's face closely, as if searching for signs of deceit. And you're ready to believe that? Dorothea asked. To risk our lives based on what? Your gut. Not my gut, he said, opening another folder. These are surveillance reports on Canellis Jr. from the past 3 years, security briefings, transcripts, activity analysis. I covered every angle, Dorothea. I needed absolute certainty before I came back. He handed them another folder. These are files on the key figures from Canellis Sr.'s circle. Who's dead, who retired, who's in prison. Almost none of them are left. It's a new era, with new people. Dorothea studied the documents for a long time before looking up. And if you're wrong, Adrian? If someone does want revenge? Then I have an evacuation plan, he answered seriously. For all of us. The documents are ready, the safe house is prepared, the money is in secure accounts. I won't risk you again, Dorothea. Never. Victoria sat by the window in the spacious living room of the family home, watching her father help her mother set the table in the garden gazebo. In the 3 months since his return, the world had seemed to turn upside down, then slowly began to rebuild itself in a new form. After that fateful conversation at the office, the three of them had spent hours going through documents, asking questions, trying to piece together a 15-year puzzle into a coherent picture. By evening, Dorothea, always composed, always in control, looked completely drained. I want to go home, she had said then. I need to think about everything. They drove in silence to her mother's apartment. At the door, her father paused. Call me when you're ready, he said quietly. I'll be waiting. No, her mother answered suddenly. Come tomorrow at 7 in the evening. I'll make dinner. We need to talk again, differently. Not about the past. About what comes next. That was the beginning of their slow, awkward reconnection. At first, it was just dinners once a week. Then more often, walks through the city in the evening, conversations that stretched late into the night. Her mother and father seemed to be rediscovering each other, not as young lovers, not as a successful businessman and his wife, but as two older, weary people bound by too much to simply forget. Victoria watched this rebirth of their relationship with mixed feelings. Sometimes it seemed like a play, with each of them performing roles written long ago. Other times, it felt like a real miracle, the healing of family wounds she had believed incurable. In early November, her father invited them both to see a house he'd bought in the suburbs. Not a luxurious mansion like so many in that area, but a cozy wooden house in Scandinavian style, surrounded by pines. "I don't want to pressure you," he said as he showed them around. "But if you ever decide to, there's enough space here for all of us." Victoria saw how her mother's eyes lit up when she saw the spacious kitchen with panoramic windows looking out onto the garden, the fireplace in the living room, the cozy library. In their old apartment, she had had a similar library with a comfortable armchair by the window, where she loved to read in the evenings. A week later, Dorothea packed her things and moved in with her husband. Not permanently, as she explained to Victoria, just to try it out. But Victoria saw how her mother seemed 10 years younger, her movements softer, her smile more frequent. Victoria herself wasn't rushing to forgive. She came to visit on weekends, accepted her father's help with practical matters. He insisted on buying her a car and helped her find a new apartment near the school so she wouldn't have to share with her roommate Martha anymore. But there remained a distance between them, one that seemed impossible to cross, until that conversation a month ago, on her 40th birthday. Her father had invited her to a restaurant. Just the two of them, without her mother. "I need to explain something to you," he said once they'd each had a glass of wine. "Something important. About why I didn't try to contact you, even after the danger had passed." Victoria froze, staring at him. He looked unexpectedly vulnerable, even afraid. "I was scared," he said simply. "Not of bullets, or gangsters, or being followed. I was afraid of your disappointment, your contempt." "Contempt?" she asked, confused. "You always looked up to me, Victoria," he went on gently. "I was your hero, I suppose, strong, brave, decisive. The one who always knew what to do. But I panicked back then. I ran. I left you. I couldn't imagine looking into your eyes and seeing that you realized your father was a coward. But you were protecting us?" "Yes," he said with a bitter smile, "that's what I told myself all those years, that I was protecting you. But the truth is, I chose the easiest way for me. I could have taken you with me. I could have found another solution. But that would have required strength, courage, resolve. And I just ran." Victoria looked at her father, older, with deep lines on his face, his gaze full of guilt, and suddenly she understood something important. Her whole life, she had seen him as a superhero, a successful businessman, a winner, someone who could do anything. But now, sitting in front of her, was just a tired man who had once made a mistake and hadn't found the strength to make it right. "You're not a coward, Dad," she said, calling him Dad for the first time in 15 years instead of the cold father. "You're just human. People make mistakes." That evening, something between them broke, the wall of resentment and misunderstanding. They talked late into the night. For the first time, not about the past, but about the present, her work at school, his new business, their plans for the future. And now, she was sitting in his house, in their house, watching her parents set the table in the garden together. Today was a special day, the anniversary of her father's return. A kind of family holiday they decided to celebrate together. Victoria stepped away from the window and went down into the garden, where the scent of grilled meat and apples hung in the air. Her father was tending the barbecue, and her mother was setting out plates. "Need help?" Victoria asked, walking up to her. "Set the cutlery, please," Dorothea smiled. They worked in silence, enjoying the warm September day, almost summery this year, as if nature itself were giving them a second summer, a new beginning. "How's school?" her father asked, turning the meat on the grill. "Fine," Victoria shrugged. "The kids are kids, noisy, restless. But a few are really talented." "She's being modest," her mother interjected. "One of her students won a literature competition." "Isn't that right, Victoria?" That was Carmen's doing, not mine, Victoria smiled. She's naturally gifted. But you noticed it and nurtured it, her father said, looking at her with pride. That means a lot. They sat down at the table, and her father poured wine into their glasses. I'd like to make a toast, he said, raising his glass. To second chances. To the chance to fix past mistakes. To both of you, for finding the strength to forgive me. It hasn't been an easy road, Dorothea replied seriously. And it's not over. But I'm glad we're on it. They drank, and Victoria noticed her father discreetly wipe his eyes. I have a toast too, she said, refilling their glasses. To truth, no matter how bitter. It's better than the sweetest lie. To truth, her father nodded. And to no more secrets between us. They ate, talked, and laughed, almost like the old days, but also completely different. They were different now, older, wiser, burdened by the years they had lived apart. But maybe that was why they could finally appreciate what they had. After lunch, her father got up and went into the house. A few minutes later, he returned with a small box. I want to show you something, he said, opening it. Inside were some papers. What is it? Victoria asked. A real will, he replied. Not the one that was just an excuse to get us all in one room. A real one. He handed the documents to Dorothea and Victoria. I wrote it right after I came back. Everything I have, the house, the business, the accounts, it all goes to you, equally. And one more thing, he took a small envelope from the box, this letter. I've been writing it over the past 15 years. Every year, on your birthday, I added a few pages. I explained why I did what I did, asked for forgiveness, told you about my life. He placed the envelope on the table. I meant for you to read it after I was gone. But now I realize that would be another form of cowardice. So here it is. If you want, read it. Or burn it, if you think everything's already been said. Dorothea took the envelope and turned it over in her hands thoughtfully. You know, Adrian, she said softly, I think we don't need to go back to the past anymore. The fact that you're here, with us, that means more than any words on paper. She looked at her daughter, as if asking for agreement. I agree with Mom, Victoria nodded. Enough of explanations and apologies. Let's just live. Her father looked at them both with an expression that made Victoria's heart ache. Relief, gratitude, love, all mixed in his gaze. Then he pointed to the bonfire they had prepared for evening tea in the corner of the garden. Shall we burn it? As a symbol, the end of the past, the beginning of the future. Her mother handed the envelope to Victoria. I think you should do it, she said. You suffered the most from his absence. You grew up without a father in the most important years. Victoria took the envelope and walked over to the fire. The flames crackled cheerfully, sending sparks into the twilight air. She looked back. Her parents stood nearby, holding hands like a young couple. A memory surfaced, an old wedding photograph of them, so young, so happy, with a whole life ahead of them. A life that turned out very differently from what they had planned. She was about to reach out to the fire when she suddenly stopped. No, she said, turning to her parents. I'm not going to do it. Why? Her father asked in surprise. Because it's part of our story, Victoria replied. Part of you, Dad. Part of all of us. We shouldn't burn the past or pretend it didn't happen. It made us who we are, with all the mistakes, the pain, the hardships. She stepped up to her father and handed the envelope back to him. Keep it, she said softly. Maybe someday we'll want to read it. Or my children will, if I have any. Or my grandchildren. It's our family history. Not always beautiful, not always right, but real. Her father hugged her tightly, just like he used to when she was a child, and she felt something final, some last splinter in her heart, dissolve and disappear forever. You're wiser than all of us, Victoria, he whispered in her ear. You always were. They stood there, The three of them, wrapped in each other's arms, against the backdrop of the fading fire and the falling night. Not perfect, wounded, but reunited. With a past that couldn't be changed but could be accepted. With a present that offered a second chance. With a future that now seemed a little less frightening, because they would face it together. When night had fully fallen, her father stirred the fire back to life and brought out a large thermos of tea. "Remember how we used to sit by the fire at the dacha in '90, he asked her mother, pouring coffee into mugs. "We'd watch Vzlyad on Fridays and then argue about it until we were hoarse." "I remember," her mother smiled. "And how you were going to go into politics, and I talked you out of it." "You were right," her father nodded. "I was too hot-headed for politics. Thought I could change everything overnight." "We were all naive back then," Dorothea said thoughtfully. "We believed a beautiful new life was just around the corner, democracy, freedom, prosperity. And what we got was the '90s, her father chuckled. "For better or worse." They fell silent, watching the fire, each lost in their own memories. "You know," Victoria suddenly said, "I just realized something. All these years I was angry at you, Dad, for disappearing. I thought you broke our family. But the truth is, you saved it. Not in the best way, not without a cost. But if you hadn't left when you did, none of this would exist, not you, not Mom, not me." "I never thought of it that way," her father said slowly. "But maybe you're right. I didn't really have much choice. I just should have found a way to come back sooner. Not waited 15 years. Everything in its time," Dorothea said wisely. "Maybe it was meant to be this way. And you know, Adrian," she turned to her husband, "maybe I couldn't have forgiven you 15 years ago. But now I can." "Really?" There was such hope in his voice that Victoria felt a lump rise in her throat. "Really?" her mother nodded, reaching out to him. "I'm not saying it will be easy, or that we can go back to what we had. But we can build something new together." Her father squeezed her mother's hand, and Victoria saw in his eyes a glimpse of the young man with the guitar and the motorcycle her mother had once fallen in love with. Despite the years, the gray hair, the wrinkles, the mistakes and losses, he was still there, inside the tired man who had finally found his way home. "Together," he echoed, as if tasting the word. "I like how that sounds." The fire crackled, casting sparks into the night sky like tiny stars, flaring to life and fading in seconds. Victoria watched her parents, their hands intertwined, the firelight flickering on their faces, and felt a strange calm settle over her, as if a long winter had finally ended and a belated but long-awaited spring had arrived. "To us," she said, raising her mug of coffee. "To our family, whatever shape it takes." "To us," her parents echoed. They sat by the fire late into the night, talking, reminiscing, making plans for the future. And when they finally went inside to their rooms, Victoria stood by the window for a long time, staring at the starry sky. Tomorrow she would return to her apartment, to her usual life, lessons, notebooks, lesson plans. But something important had shifted. The heaviness she had carried in her heart for so many years was gone. The bitterness at the injustice of losing her father at the start of adulthood had faded. In its place was something new, acceptance. Acceptance of the past, with all its mistakes and pain. Acceptance of the present, imperfect, complicated, but alive. And acceptance of the future, unknown, but full of possibility. She closed the window and lay down in bed, remembering her father's last words to her that evening. "You know, Victoria, all my life I was afraid of one thing, that I wouldn't have time to fix my mistakes, that I'd die leaving behind only pain and disappointment. But tonight I realized I made it. And whatever happens next, I'm grateful for that chance." She smiled as she closed her eyes. Her father had come back. And however difficult the path had been, they had walked it together. Against all odds, despite 15 lost years, despite the hurt and fear. And now, finally, they could begin to live again, not forgetting the past, but not letting it define the future either. Simply together, building a new story of their family, one day at a time.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.